Welcome to the Irish NFL show. The opening game of the new season is now speeding towards us like Tyreek Hill, and we are previewing each divisional race in depth. You can check out each of our other divisional previews wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find our preseason predictions, our Super Bowl picks, and lots of other content on our social channels. But now it is to the AFC East that we turn, a division won by the Buffalo Bills last year. Guys, to the Buffalo Bills, anything but a championship game appearance, you would think at a bare minimum is going to be failure based on what they've got. Very much a roster that has a lot of continuity based on where they finished up last year. Not a huge number of additions. A lot of people would feel that they didn't really need to do an awful lot. Key departure maybe with Leslie Frazier leaving the house, column, which may impact them defensively, which has traditionally been a strength, but that's left a bad taste in some mouths around the league.
Yeah, it certainly has with the way it's gone, and we've never really got a full explanation on that. It's supposed to be a sabbatical, but really, can you see him kind of coming back? Obviously, look, the season ended in really disappointing fashion against the Bengals, and they didn't seem to be able to get a stop. But ultimately, having started the season with their hair on fire last year and been so impressive, it really petered out. But it wasn't just the game against the Bengals. There had been numerous kind of examples along the way, and Josh Allen's injury, and people seem very down on them this year, and I wouldn't be so down. I think offensively, I expect them actually to have a better year, because I think if Allen is healthy, I think that the ground game should be better. That's one area that improved a little bit. And look, Kincaid could be a really, really nice addition, but how will Sean McDermott calling plays impact this team? That it remains to be seen. It's a very difficult thing to do, to game manage and to call any plays. It's probably a little bit easier to call defensive plays, and he is very experienced. I'm still pretty high on them because of Josh Allen and just what he brings. It's different to anyone else, I feel, in the way in which he can kind of put a team on his back. They are going to need him to do that, and things after a very tempestuous opening to training camp, things seem to have settled down with Stefan Diggs.
Brian, this is a team that's won, 25 or 26 regular season games over the last 2 years. They've been an absolute model of consistency. Are some of the naysayers at least maybe overweighting on what happened in one or two playoff games, one playoff game last year in particular? It's interesting to contrast where we were on the Bills heading into, where the general consensus was on the Bills heading into the season before last versus this season, where they were so close, flip of a coin, leading to changes in the way the league actually handles the overtime situation in the playoffs. The season before, last season, obviously got handled by the Bengals at home, which is a massive disappointment. But they've been there or thereabouts. Surely we should have a little bit more confidence in what they'll do this year.
Yeah, I would agree, Connor. I think last year a lot of things went against them. Obviously, Colin touched on that particular playoff game, and obviously what we had happening in December was very unfortunate. But I felt towards the back end of the season, there was a weight of expectation on the team, and it's very easy to go on a run in September, October. When you start getting into those really difficult games come December, when you're playing for the seeding, I know there's only one real seed now in terms of the 4th seed, but we saw a game last year where they went in and reversed that result for the playoffs, and they beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, which not many teams do, and it looked like all things were going in the right direction. I think this season, this offseason in particular, well, as Colin alluded to, that Stefan Diggs kind of situation where it kind of went for a week or two, I think they'll be, quietly confident and happy that the spotlight has been off them, because it's been on one of their rivals within the division all off season, still is with the Jets because of the Hard Knocks situation, and we're seeing the back end of that show. But they'll be quietly going about their business, saying, and you touched on it there, they haven't had to do a lot of amendments to the team because it's still a stacked offense and defense. We were fortunate to have one of the Bills beat writers on during the offseason, and I did touch on the Leslie Frazier situation, and he dismissed it. He said that Sean McDermott, throughout the course of the last 4 years, has been heavily involved in all schemes defensively, and it's always been in the office and in the rooms, in terms of preparing for games, both defensively and offensively, albeit he's a defensively minded head coach. So he doesn't buy that there's going to be an adverse reaction to Leslie Frazier walking away. He thinks that whatever happens, the Prince are always Sean McDermott, and it will be Sean McDermott's defense. And it always has been. But I just to I suppose circle back, I think the expectations are right for them. And I think they should be, looked at as a team for serious consideration to be in the Super Bowl and maybe topple the Chiefs.
The counterpoint, I suppose, Brian, and you're the perfect man to talk to this, to any doubts that might seep in over Leslie Frazier, as we mentioned at the outset, is how the Bills coped without Brian Daboll last year. I mean, we saw the impact he made on New York, very much the real deal, the coaching mastermind that we all suspected that he was when he was OC in Buffalo. They dealt with that pretty damn well.
They did, but there was also elements of Josh Allen's game that were, not Josh Allen. Like we saw, like some of his interceptions were. And the reason why I talk about the interception, we see what he did with Daniel Jones last year. Like he essentially took Josh Allen and he reduced his count of interceptions. And he did a very similar model with Daniel Jones. So he was the least interception-prone quarterback in the league. Bearing in mind where he was in his career up to that point, he did it with Josh Allen. And last year in games like the Jets and the Vikings game, we saw Josh Allen go back to traits of old. And you wonder, is that because Brian Daboll wasn't there? So as good as they were, there were still elements, and he still speaks to Bills fans, and they still suggest if Brian Daboll was still in charge, we wouldn't have seen certain elements of the games last year, which led to defeats, such as that Vikings game where he threw that interception in the end, and various other games throughout the course of the season.
Well, let's move the relatively short hop to New England and talk about the Patriots column. It's a long time since there's been less fear of a New England team than there is heading into this season of the Patriots. Is that just when Belichick and the Pats are at their most dangerous, do you think, or are we just about right in fearing that or thinking that the Wicked Witch of the East is finally dead?
Well, I think defensively they are still fantastic, and Bill Belichick can absolutely make magic happen. We've seen it time and time again. He picks up guys, he turns them into phenomenal corners. They leave, other teams spend an absolute fortune on them, and they are nowhere near what they would be. And you look at this Pats defense, and I expect the defense to be really good, both on the front and in the secondary. I think they will keep the Patriots in games, but ultimately for me, there isn't the firepower for them to really win games. Now, last year, I mean, it was almost, you kind of wonder, and I had JP Acosta on the show a couple of times over the last few months, and he kind of joked that Bill Belichick, once Brady left, was kind of treating the NFL as a side quest, like doing different things, or like in Sim City years ago, you used to build a city and then you could create disasters that would ruin your city, and that seemed to be it, because naming Matt Patricia as your kind of de facto, or not naming him but appointing him as your de facto offensive coordinator, bringing Brian Hoyer in, and then deciding you were going to play QB hokey cokey with Mac Jones and with Bailey Zappi, only to then cut Bailey Zappi. I mean, Zappi, he threw a couple of bombs down the field and people got very excited about it. And ultimately, I never saw anything that convinced me that he was better than Mac Jones. I don't know if Belichick was just trying to prove a point to Jones. Now they brought in Matt Corral, who the Panthers cut, a former third-round pick of theirs in 2022. The Patriots, by the way, got, when the Panthers traded up to get Matt Corral, they traded with the Patriots, so they got picks for that, and they got Matt Corral without him ever playing a single snap for the Panthers. So maybe Bill Belichick is side questing, and he won that one. But I look at the weapons, I think on the ground they'll be fine. I just don't think they're explosive enough to score enough points. I think there'll be plenty of games where they're in it into the fourth quarter, but ultimately they'll come up short in too many of them. They could. This to me strikes me as a 9-8, 8-9 team.
Brian, a team that would be very disappointed with a record, anything like that, and a team that's very much expected to be explosive this year, the New York Jets, which at time of recording, just off the back of a fairly spicy preseason game against your Giants, which gave us a gift of a Hard Knocks clip of Aaron Rodgers saying to Jihad Ward, I don't even know who you are, bro.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he should have looked at the coverage of last October's game in Tottenham, because Jihad Ward put him on his arse in that game. So, but he also referred to it as JetLife Stadium as opposed to MetLife Stadium, and we obviously saw the blind side hit by Randall Cobb. I mean, this is preseason action. It's the final preseason action. The guys are trying to find their way onto the roster, and they're out doing things like that. I think the Jets, in a strange way, and I had a podcast with Anthony Wharton over the course of the last few days, and we spoke about, are the Jets finding a way to make themselves very unpopular with fan bases? And Anthony going to caveat that with the fact that they haven't been in the playoffs for so long that people still feel sorry for the Jets. But the way in which they've kind of gone, and maybe here's the Hard Knocks and the Jet, what do they call it, Jet Drive, or whatever that particular program is. We're seeing
One Jet Drive, isn't it?
That's the one, yeah. One Jet Drive. And to be honest, they're about as similar as the other Hard Knocks, and that's how you might as well be watching the same thing twice over. But there's so much content coming out, and a lot of people are kind of getting slightly disgruntled with the manner in which they're going about their business. And all of a sudden they're putting their name on their back, which they would have had anyway because of Aaron Rodgers. And like we just touched on the Bills there, Bills will be quietly confident going into that game. Like, the Bills are favourites for that game. For all the hype of the Jets, the Bills are 2-point favourites to beat the Jets on opening Monday night of the season. The Broncos game is going to become a feisty one because of the Sean Payton situation. The Giants players have obviously marked their card already for the game come late October. Like, they don't need to be putting themselves in this position. And
they have the Chiefs before then as well, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's a tough schedule, and we've talked about this before. Like, you don't need to squint too hard to see them 1-3.
Yeah, week 4 Sunday Night Football against the Jets. I mean, there's two storylines coming here. It's either one, they'll be fantastic, they'll set it alight, they'll be up there challenging for the division, and everybody will be saying, this is the Jets we expected because of the nature of the players in which they brought in and put around Aaron Rodgers, or things because of the schedule which they have don't go well early in the season, and the pressure builds and builds, and sometimes when the pressure becomes too much, you just can't turn it around. I still think they're playoff bound. Personally, I don't think they'll win the division. I still think the Bills are a standout team. I think they'll make the playoffs, but I certainly think the start of the season can be so crucial for them. I mean, Bills Monday night, Cowboys week 2, Patriots, as Colin said, they'll give you a game. Chiefs week 4. They've got the Eagles for the bye week to come off the bye with the New York game, which will be feisty in itself. They need to be coming out of that, for me, 4-2 to be realistically in a position to win the division. I see them playoff bound. I think they've done enough outside of the Rodgers move. Like, Dalvin Cook is another sublime player to bring in. They've done so much. It would be a shame to put a team like this together and not find themselves in the playoffs. And if they don't find themselves in the playoffs, ultimately, I think where Colin talked about Derek Carr being the fall guy, I think the head coach will end up being the fall guy.
Yeah. A team that, unlike the Jets, did make the playoffs last year, of course, the Miami Dolphins, which falls to me for the wrap of our AFC East preview. I said in the live show, and I've been saying throughout the offseason, I still think they can match their playoff place this year as well. A lot of people think that they probably won't, and I think the guess is a lot of fear over what might happen to it. Serious issues with the 2 brain injuries that he suffered during the season just gone, and not entirely brilliantly managed, it would have to be said, by either the Dolphins themselves or by the NFL. Still concerns about the return to play protocol and how that operates. And I guess you're looking ahead and thinking it's going to be a tough season, that he needs his offensive line to hold up. You need that Mike McDaniel running game, that Shanahan offense to protect him to the best degree possible. And a lot of people feeling that, if there's any breakdown in that and Tua gets injured, that's going to be it for the Dolphins. My sense is, I guess QB1 going down for any team is pretty much a disaster this year. You're probably overweight a little bit on that for the Dolphins, but I still think Mike McDaniel has a lot to come. What I'm really excited to see this year is how he builds on what he did last year. There is that sense among some of the commentary that people kind of started to figure him out towards the end of last season. I'm not so sure that's necessarily the case. I always get the impression that Mike McDaniel was one of the most adherent and most best listening Kyle Shanahan disciples. I think he's going to cook up some nice stuff next year. I'm a big fan of what I've seen from him last year. Good that they didn't bite Jim Irsay's hand off, of course, for the outrageous Jonathan Taylor trade demand, guy that Jim Irsay said he didn't want. and we'll be happy to see leave the building. And next thing, they're asking the Dolphins for Jalen Waddle and the first round pick if they wanted to trade for him. Not one that I think the Dolphins had to think about for too long. Bit of a shame, of course, to see Jalen Ramsey injured. I think it was going to be exciting to see what they were going to do on defense and how he'd pair up with Xavier Howard on what looks like a mean secondary there. I think they're a pretty balanced team. I think, again, with the big caveat that hopefully Tua stays fit and healthy for the season, I think they could surprise some people. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see them make the playoffs, and we will see how that pans out. Any last words, Colm and Brian, before we call it a night for the AFC East?
I'd be surprised if two teams don't come out of this division. I'll lean Jets as the second team with the Bills winning the division, but I certainly think you touched on there with the Dolphins. I think there's more than enough of capability within this division for two teams to be coming out and making the playoffs come January.
One thing I heard recently that I thought was interesting is, and sometimes perhaps he can be a victim of things he has said in the past, but back in November, one Aaron Rodgers said that if the NFL really cared about player safety, then perhaps they should consider ponying up and changing all fields to grass surfaces. Well, Aaron Rodgers is going to play 14 games this year on turf. And when you are approaching 40, that is much tougher on your knees, on your hips. And as we saw last year, it can be really difficult. We saw Von Miller go down, saw Rashawn Gary go down. Quite a few players last year really raised concerns. It was very, very prominent. And I know that there was new turf laid at MetLife, or what did you say, Brian? He's calling it Jet Life. Even still, it's still turf. It's not grass. I think that is just something to keep an eye on. And, if there are any tweaks and on your calf or anything, turf can definitely exacerbate it. I do expect the Jets, to push the Bills very, very hard. But the O-line and turf, just a couple of things to keep an eye on.
Very good. There we leave it for the AFC East. You can check out all our other divisional previews on our social channels. We've all the links up there. Season just around the corner, as are those pass rushers that will be chasing down Aaron Rodgers, and we will see how that all pans out when the Bills take on the Jets on September 11th.